Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Rolewise podcast. I'm Mike, and here are my co-hosts Jeff and Brent. Today, we're diving into a topic that is near and dear to every game master's heart: rules you want to steal. So, whether you're a seasoned GM or just starting out, we all know that games can be made better by doing just a little bit of home brewing. And sometimes the best way to do that is stealing that from another system. So we've got a small list of rules that we've encountered over the past couple of years that we like to see in our games. So sometimes this could be a rule that we just picked up and we've started to insert into other games, or whatever it may be. But they do add a little bit of extra spice, and hopefully they make the games more fun. So let's go ahead and get started on rules we like to steal. So, Jeff, I know you're really you really like to steal rules from other systems. Wait, that's not what I meant to say.
Yeah, why not?
We know you're
sure.
a prolific thief.
Flattery. What is it? Is copying is the best form of flattery? But just so everybody knows, we're not publishing a game doing this.
No.
But what we are doing is we are borrowing these rules and playing with other games.
As far as I understand, you can't copyright rules anyways, so...
Yeah, so you could do this. If you wanted to make your own system that was just completely a mishmash of your favorite rules, knock yourself out. Tell us about it. We'll talk about it.
Also, disclaimer, don't listen to us for any legal advice, ever.
We're not lawyers.
Yeah. You should navigate that on your own. What we're saying is we like to add these to our own home games. Sure. And so you may not see us play with these rules on stream because, obviously we're trying to play the games as intended before we freestyle on them. But if you've already played a system and you want to add a little panazz to it, Jeff, what is a rule that you've encountered in the last year or two, because we've been playing so many more games, that you really, really like?
Yeah, we've encountered this in several systems now. As I was researching it to try to find out where the origins were, it's possible that it's Call of Cthulhu. It could have been another system. It's pushed roles. There are times where your character is trying to perform something that is critical to the story, critical to their personal goals, just a really impactful moment for whatever reason. And they roll and they fail, right? Yeah. And there's consequences for that failure. With the push roll mechanic, you get one more chance, right? Try again and hopefully succeed. But if you fail the second time, the consequences are even more dire. You know, whether it's the thief trying to pick a lock that is a room that the party has to get into, and a guard shows up the second time. I don't know. You can come up with different things, but I think it gives a chance to create narrative tension in an otherwise really deflating situation that's over too soon. You know what I mean? Like, no,
you didn't pick the lock. What happens?
Yeah. Oh, you didn't pick the lock. Okay. Well, I guess we can't get in. Let's go home, guys.
I think it's more of those instances. I think it gives you more of an opportunity to reroll in a situation that you think is heroic, that your character, if it's something your character should do well at, it stops it from being one of those things that's like, oh, my heroic fighter just failed horribly on this roll and now he looks like an idiot. I as we all know, that's one of the things that I hate about really swingy systems like D20 is that your chances of rolling a 1 and rolling a 20 are essentially the same. So there's a good chance that you might fail and and it might be at the worst possible time for your character concept.
So out of curiosity, I know, Brent, you've played quite a bit of Call of Cthulhu. Was that the first time you experienced pushing dice rolls, or did you experience it in a different...
I've played a lot of Delta Green. Delta Green is a separate rule set. I haven't played that much of Call of Cthulhu. I think maybe I played it once. And I don't remember... It maybe it have been an earlier edition of Call of Cthulhu that I haven't played. So it's possible. I'm familiar with pushing dice rolls from Vaesen and systems like that we've played recently.
And the nice thing about Vaesen, when it's pushing its dice rolls, is that it's very easy that how it mechanically represents on your character in terms of your outcome. Because if because I feel one of the things that's always can be tricky about dice rolls is that okay, your consequence for not picking the lock is going to be you don't get in. That's easy. But if you push the dice rolls, what are additional consequences that you have when you don't pick that lock? And I think if you put it all on the GM to think about these additional consequences all the time, that can be a little hard. But with games like Vaesen and Alien and stuff like that, you take extra conditions sometimes. You can be like exhausted, like you can get angry, and these can have mechanical impacts down the way that I push something, it failed, and now I have this kind of this lingering effect as I go forward.
Yeah, I actually like those lingering effects because I think they take your character in these, just like off the beaten path directions, where you're forced to think a little bit more about your actions, or, okay, now the character is stressed. How are they going to react? They're going to think less. They're going to act more. They're going to probably be not as good at some things, maybe better at others though, because they're, they're wound super tight and ready to react at any moment, so maybe they can't be caught by surprise. But I actually like it when we've played and we've been able to do that. Like, I don't think that it gets overused because usually the consequences are pretty bad, right?
Yeah, you really have to think about it.
You have to think about it. You're not using it willy-nilly. You're using it on important stuff, and you're taking a chance, right?
Yeah.
You're throwing your bet out there, betting on yourself.
Yeah.
Well, but it's nice though, because the one thing that is always tricky about games and like re-roll mechanics is that it's because it's optional and you can kind of like gamble effectively on double or nothing, right? I always like that, but it doesn't mean that you're going to succeed out of the gate, right? I like that it still has that opportunity for there to be a chance at failure, whereas I have seen a lot of luck systems lately where they just add a die to your roll to give you a higher chance of success if you're close, and all those kind of things where you can kind of tip it over. But I do like how in the push your dice rolls, it's just like, okay, let's double or nothing. Let's see what happens.
Well, the push mechanic in Vaesen is different because you are more if you roll like in Vaesen or Alien, if you're using that specific push mechanic, you're more likely to succeed. There's more dice, and it's just the 6 is all you need. Whereas the push mechanic or like an advantage mechanic in like a D20 system, you're still just as likely. You're as likely as unlikely as the first time you rolled it. So I think it works better in some systems than others, but I do think I really like having the option to re-roll a dice when I think I'm doing something important.
Yeah. And so I think to Jeff's point, where you make it kind of critical to the character that if they fail and all that stuff, because I think if there is no consequence to pushing the dice roll, I think if you introduce it and you don't have clear consequences, then I feel like it could get overused. Because I do remember in Vaesen they were like, you could push your dice rolls, and I was like, I don't really understand this push mechanic as well. And then I think at the beginning we were like, you can push it, and then I read a little more, I was like, oh, that should be much worse if you push dice rolls.
You have to.
Well, yeah, don't you take
the consequence has to be a little worse, maybe even than the possibility of success, right? You know what I mean? Like,
I think that depends
on what makes it interesting.
I think that depends strongly on the game. Like Vaesen is a game where you're not heroes, so there has to be that stress mechanic where like you take more stress or whatever if you either fail, or I think you may even take a point of stress if you just like, don't you take a point of stress if you just push the roll? Like, isn't that
like right? you take I'm trying to remember now because it's been so long since we played. I thought you took
I think you take a stress. Well, I think you take a stress when you push, and then if you fail, you take a condition. I think that's what it is. So that sounds right. Yeah, and it's similar in Alien too. And I think that's important because those games aren't about heroic characters. Those games are about characters that are people, surviving and in conflicts that they don't necessarily understand. Sure. I personally, and this is one of the rules that I would steal, is I personally like hero points or fate points or like inspiration points, where in heroic games, like D20 heroic games, where you just have a pool of points where you can just re-roll the dice, and it doesn't really have any sort of downside. It's just like, yep, you get a re-roll if you think that this is a dice roll important enough, but you have a pool that doesn't refresh all the time. I think for those, especially those swingy systems like Dungeons and Dragons or any of the D20 systems where you're playing a character that is supposedly heroic and they fail, just out and out fail on something that they should have been good at, I think is a situation where they should have some sort of reroll mechanic that the player can choose to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right. Pushing, because the ability to like push it, get your chance to go through it. And it also means that as a game master, if you have a situation in which like, I'm not to say that you can only have one solution, but if the players are really set on this solution to be the one that succeeds, it allows the players to have a little bit of agency to decide how they want to advance the story. Because,
Right.
you know, if you gate stuff behind things and you're like, oh, well, now I have to create
Don't
this whole new effort to.
Don't do that.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that
Don't
there's
get
only
the
one
main
way
plot
in, but
behind
now
one
you
die
have
roll.
to,
It can be
but you
failed.
have to go back to the drawing board effectively and
Right.
find a new solution to a
Right.
problem. Whereas the players are like, we have to shortcut this, man. We have to go right through this door, and now we bust it open we're gonna kick it open.
Now we're going to use the party's favorite tool, violence.
always. So yeah, no
Well,
pushing.
it got them that far, Brent. That's all I'm saying.
That's right. It's gotten us this far.
Yeah.
When every problem isn't when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
It does. It needs to be pounded.
So that, I think that's pretty good. And so, Brent, what about you? You have I
have a couple that I think are good. One, I would say, so like I said, the hero point or fate point mechanic, whereas like for heroic games, just throw the reroll out there. Like, yep, you're in the big fight and you rolled a 1. Go ahead and use your hero point and reroll and do better. I think that's good for any sort of heroic game. One of the other ones that I really like, there's 2 more that I really like, and one is more of a GM suggestion. I think it was actually in Feng Shui, I think originally, where it's like, if your player describes something cool, give them a bonus for it. Like reward them for thinking of something that's exceptional by giving them some sort of bonus, even if it's a +1 or +2.
Sure.
Especially in D20 systems, because it's so swingy. If they just like put thought into something like that, like reward them for it, because that'll ensure them that they do it every time, and that'll add a lot of flavor to your games. The other one is, if you struggle with character creation in your games, people that have problems coming with backstories or whatnot, there's a lot of systems that have life path tables that you can use, where you can roll on a life path and basically generate the character's history, which is kind of nice, because if you're in a rut where people are like, I'm playing, Bob
number 4.
Yeah, I'm playing Bob, the immortal warrior who doesn't have a family or kids or dogs, or anything. Like, you can add some variability, like, oh, we're gonna roll on this life path system. Traveler is a big one for the life path system. It's notorious for older editions where you could actually die in character creation, then you had to start all over again. Hackmaster has a silly version. Distal had a really good one. I really enjoyed Distal's generation method for that. So like, there's lots of games you can pull those tables from and those rules from, if you want to add some kind of like randomness or flair to like your character creation. And I think those Cyberpunk has one. And I think those are really good for players that are like in a rut, or like, I can't really think of something for any character's backstory. And if you really want that buy-in from your characters to have the backstory, it's kind of a shortcut to getting that for your players.
I like that.
Yeah, no, it's good. Honestly, I have to say that I think I've seen a few different versions of that now, and I liked the simplicity but sophistication that Distal's approach was taking, where it was just the way the sentences were framed were nice.
Yeah, Distal's version is really nice. I think it's very specific to Distal though, which could be a problem with you. You might have to rework the tables a little bit, but they're good systems for. It's good for Distal for sure.
Yeah, but it just was an eye opening, like, because if you wanted to, you could take this, because the sentences were this is the 2-sentence structure was a very basic, like, hey, this really generates a lot of compelling story points with minimal effort that gives you a broad enough brush that you can interpret them however you want. And I thought, like, for example, you had what was yours, Brent? Do you remember your character? Like, it was like, he goes to funerals or collects corpses or something like that.
He went to fancy parties, often populated by the dead or something like that. And so it really conjured an image of this like upper crust kind of snobby noble that dabbled in necromancy and hung out with corpses, sort of thing. It was really interesting. Like, and that really inspired me to think that that's, like I said, that's one I like a Lifepath system that I really enjoyed when we played with it.
Yeah, and I'd actually be curious, because I know that, as you said, that there are definitely games that have set that out as a component of their character creation and stuff like that. So in the comments, if people want to throw their favorite version of that out, because obviously we haven't played every game, but we are curious to see what other really well received games there are out there, to say, hey, this is a Lifepath system. This is what, this is what we found to be really interesting. I feel like comments that would be really fun set of comments to go through.
There has to be a lot, because when I was looking at stuff, I looked at this one, and I actually saw a couple of people reference a 20 questions system that I don't think was fully homebrewed. I think parts of it might have been homebrewed. But I mean, it was just basically 20 questions about, the character's backs that when you answer them, help flesh.
Are you talking about the knives and the spoons?
No, it wasn't fully knives and spoons.
It's just 20 questions. It's a pretty common GM thing. Like, I think it was originally homebrewed. But I mean,
maybe it was
probably inspired by like Traveler and stuff like that. But like, I know I've found different lists of 20 questions for different games that assorted GMs have put online just as a reference. Because like I said, you run into either like you have experienced players who sometimes are kind of in a creative block on what they want to play, and this is kind of a way to jump to that. Or you have newer players who are like, oh, I have no idea how to make a character's backstory, and then this is a good way to like help them flesh that stuff out. And if you just like have players that like rolling dice, like random.
A lot of people just like rolling dice. I'm going to be honest. Like you were dismissive of the Hackmaster tables, but I have more fun making Hackmaster characters than almost any system, because it's ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the Hackmaster tables are made to be entertaining because they're gonzo funny. Like the fact that you can be nearsighted and you're a racial enemy to apes and stuff like that. Like just stuff that's just insane. Is what's interesting about the Hackmaster character tables.
But that's sometimes the kind of game that you want to play, right? You want to have something that just, it's not the same, oh, we're doing a fantasy game. Okay, well, I'm going to dust off the same character that I've played 75 iterations of in the past 5 years.
And that's why the Lifepath stuff is kind of interesting, because you can do that. And it'll flavor the game that you want. If you want to play a more comedic game, Hackmaster is a great game of tables for you to play.
Yeah,
and it's deadly.
So one thing that I did want to mention, just to kind of revisit the pushing rolls, is I did look it up really quick. In Vaesen, having failed the test, you can choose to muster your strength to give it one more try. This can only be done once per action. When pushing your roll, you suffer a condition. So if you're using physique or precision, you choose a physical condition. If you use logic or empathy, you choose a mental one. So you get a condition right out of the gate. And then, of course, the problem with Vaesen is obviously if you assume too many conditions, then you've broken. And being broken is really bad in the game.
And you could get a second. You technically could get a second condition if you also fail.
No, you just get the condition when you roll it apparently like this. So like you just get a condition when you push it. So that's why it's really, that's the narrative restriction on pushing rolls.
Well, yeah, because you are more likely to succeed if you push. So I guess that
you can push rolls that you've already succeeded, since in Vaesen a single six doesn't necessarily determine success. Sometimes you need multiple successes to succeed at the skill test, and so that's interesting, because we haven't played Vaesen in a long time, and I do think that there's there's a new Mountain Saga or something like that. I was going to read through that and see if any of those adventures were fun to play, but I kind of wouldn't mind revisiting Vaesen for a session or two. So
it's a fun game.
It is. Okay, so I think I have one to add now. Is that right? Is that one rule that I like to steal?
Well, you GM a lot, so I would hope that you're homebrew.
We hope so.
I've never stolen a rule ever. I am a Boy Scout of GMing. No, just kidding.
Well, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Well, I will say one thing. Like, this is sort of hard for me because I am kind of a purist with rule sets. Like, I feel like the rules are generated for a game for a reason, and that bespoke rule set tells the type of story that the person wants. So this was a little hard for me. That's why some of the rules are kind of like outside of the general rule set. Like the character creation stuff isn't really a hard and fast rule. But I think there's definitely games, D&D, that could do a lot from stealing rules from other games, because it's just or using some of the optional rules from like the DMG that sometimes people don't, because I think it adds a lot of flavor to your game.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the truth. I think there's a lot of people that have only read the player's handbook and have played a lot of D&D, and they haven't really explored the DMG, or at least in the 5th edition version. So
I would say that's most versions, not just the 5th edition version.
Okay,
I think I feel confident saying that. People can correct me, but I feel confident saying that.
Yeah, but so for the rule that I would probably say that I've enjoyed using the most, actually are going to be clocks. Now, people, may know clocks from various games. I think that it was developed before Blades in the Dark, but Blades in the Dark, which it was really codified the concept of clocks in an RPG game. But I think in like Apocalypse World, the game that Blades in the Dark was based off of, had a concept that it used. And I think people have used various tracking type things and everything like that beforehand. But I like the idea of clocks because I like the idea of there being some narrative way to build tension based on player action. And the first time that I really experienced clocks was actually in Fabula Ultima. So if anybody's curious, like, I mean, this is kind of a recent thing for me, honestly. I'm surprised that I played as many games as we played, and the Fabula Ultima is like, these things are clocks. And I'm like, oh, brilliant. And so you can add these kind of things to do progress tracking. You can build tension. You can kind of control how the narrative plays out and everything like that. And like in Fabula Ultima, basically it could be used in a few different ways. You could use it to like, how effectively did you escape? Fill in parts of a clock because there's a goal that you're trying to achieve, and then you can mechanically do that. But I think that there's other ways that you can do it, that if there's like a clock that's used as a countdown, you can say, as a GM, rather than getting into very strict timekeeping, which the reason why clocks are my favorite thing is because I know there are parties out there that follow the game calendar, and they know how many days it's been since they've been traveling. They've got everything marked down, and so they know in the 50th day of Greyhawk's calendar, they know exactly which day of the week it is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've never really been good at that. So it's just narratively been where I want it. But with a clock, I can say, okay, well, this is what's happened. This is how the countdown is progressing. And these are the things that are happening as we're progressing in this countdown. So by the time I've got two wedges of my clock filled in, these things show differently for the game. And I do like it. Because honestly, I think that it provides, like, if you choose to like have it visible, it provides clarity to the players, and it provides a sense of urgency, right? Because they know that as Mike is filling in a wedge, that things are going the way you want them to, or not, depending on the type of type of clock that it is. And so I think that it's pretty good. How about you guys? We haven't used it in as many games because I haven't used them on any on-stream games, but for off-stream, I use it for a few of the things that I do, just so I can have like that sense of urgency. But what has your experience been with clocks?
Go ahead, Brent.
No, you go ahead first.
I was just going to say, I don't mind them, like the endeavors that we talked about, in Cosmere. To me, they're all variations on the same core concept, and I don't mind them if they're well done, if the players actively participate, if the GM, is using it not just as a mechanism for a bunch of dice rolls, that you're getting everybody's buy-in. In general, I like them. I've had some exceptional experiences with them, and I've had some poor experiences with them.
Well, and I think there's actually a concept that I could probably elaborate on here, is that clocks can be a way to give abstract things like hit points, or like it's success levels or something like that. And I think that for me, I don't mind if there's like a thing that you're working towards and all that kind of stuff, but I think I like them to feel more on the narrative side, like these are the things that are happening. And I don't like you to attack the lock and have to hit the lock 3 times to to succeed. That isn't my idealized version. I like it to be like, oh, well, you guys have a tension thing over here. Tell me what you're doing, and we'll decide how much that advances the clock or not. I think that's more my feeling, because I think you're right. There are some times in which the clock can be over applied and be like, okay, well, you need to do a clock here, roll 3 successes.
Yeah. No, it's like anything. Used appropriately, I think they're great. So, Brent?
I don't really have an opinion on them. I'm fine with games that I'm playing and that use them. When I'm GMing, they're not. I don't use them. I feel like there's other. My system for like building that time is just different than the clocks.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and it's kind of it's more narrative, so I don't necessarily track time in that manner. I think they work, but it's just not something that I've been able to implement effectively, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, it's something that it like I'm still an amateur with it, because I've really only seen it when we started playing Fabula Ultima, and it's not like every game it's there, but I have seen its influence in a lot of situations. Like, for example, when we were doing like the Game Master's Guide to Proactive Role Playing, clocks were a narrative device that they suggested that that were used a lot for NPCs and everything like that, to measure like organizational goal progress and everything like that. So
well, that's because the whole book was inspired by Blades in the Dark. I mean, they basically said that in the beginning, that this is how to make your D&D game more like Blades in the Dark, was kind of their
it's true, but the concept of clocks, like I said, it kind of transcends system for a way to develop some tension, and that's why I said it's just cool that it's been more broadly said to the community that this is something that you can bring to it. And I think a really good clock can, if it's not overused, and all of a sudden I bring out the clocks and I go, okay, well, we have one wedge in here. You now know you have a countdown that you're kind of fighting against, and I have it lit up. I think it's cool, honestly.
No, I think it's good for people who can use it effectively. I have not found a way to use it effectively in games that I run. Is more like it seems to be a mechanic that throws off my pacing when I try it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's fair.
And that's fair. I mean, because if you use it and it doesn't follow the game way that you want it to, because again, that could be tricky about it. But
yeah, like when we played A-State, like A-State is a Blades in the Dark, powered by whatever the Dark or whatever it's
Forged
called
in the
now.
Dark.
Forged in the Dark. That's like that game, and I felt like that game just came across as a little clunky because I was trying it, and that doesn't mean I wouldn't get better at it with more practice. But I'm just used to running games the way that I run them, so that's kind of what I'm going with. There's other tools I would rather work with more.
So you would say that you loosely homebrew every system to Brent style?
Well, I think that's what every person.
I think it's what everybody does. Yeah. No, I know. I'm being facetious, but yeah, you're right. Like every GM is a little different. They're all unique.
Well, that's because us old guys, when we started running games, like no game of D&D would have been different would have been the same before the internet. There's no way. Because people would have, there was nothing to compare it against. Like now there's a community that's all like, well, this is how you should run this rule. But before that, there wasn't.
Like, there was Dragon Magazine.
Was everybody writing? Was everybody writing letters?
Yeah, where you wrote a letter in, and 3 months later it appeared in an issue, and then 3 months after that, you got a response.
Or like you and another guy were corresponding via letter about how you're running your D&D games. I'm sure that happened, but like, okay, so those two people may have ran the same D&D game, maybe
conventions,
but there really wasn't a way. Rules is written, and the reason that I say this is because when I played 40K, nothing was more obvious than 40K that before the internet, like different gaming clubs were playing different games. And like then you would go to a tournament and people would be like, well, that's not how you play that rule, and then there would be arguments about it. Like I don't think there's anything more clear, has ever been more clear to me than 40K in that sense.
The interpretation of the rules.
I broke a guy's jaw so that the rule was interpreted this way. And now you're telling me I'm wrong?
Yeah, just like it's written in a way that isn't clear.
Yeah.
And so one person makes a judgment call and says, well, this is how we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And then everybody
else gets on board.
Yeah. And then everybody in the group runs.
And then you find out you're wrong.
Plays the game that way. And then you go sit at somebody else's table and it's like, no, that's not how that rule works. Oh.
Yeah.
So like I think more people play the same game more often now, but like I think those of us who've been running games for years, like your games are probably a little bit different than other people because you do have a style of the way you do it.
So. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's good. So I mean, honestly, and the nice thing about it is by playing more games, you get more inspiration and your style adjusts even more. And that's what's been part of this journey that's been really cool is that, I've found rules in games that we haven't played yet that I've really enjoyed and tried to introduce subtly into games that we played without being so overt about it. But it's nice because it just allows you to expand, and it makes it so that you can take even a known game and add some unknown variables to it. So that it piques people's interest about it. Cause it's not, I think that's part of why these games are fun, especially when you play it like, there are certain reasons why people play RPGs and everything like that, but just the part of discovery that gets played, that happens when you introduce a new rule set could be like, oh, well, this changes how my character plays a little bit. That can be, it can be a little bit of fun. So that's, I think those are three interesting enough rules that, pushing dice rolls, life paths, and clocks are things that, very much don't have a home that like they can be anywhere, anytime. And they can make your game more fun, more interesting, and all that stuff. And we'd be curious to hear what people in the comments have for the types of rules that, they've brought from their games. Like, what favorite rules have you been like, I'm never not using this ever again? Let us know. We'd like to hear what you have to say. And of course, if you like these kind of discussions, please like, subscribe, let us know in the comments, so that if you want to know other games that we've encountered that we've really liked the rules and we want to highlight those rules, even if you don't necessarily steal them, let us know. We'd be happy to talk about them in the future. So with that, Jeff, socials,
Facebook, Threads, Twitter, look for @rolewise. We'll be there. Email us, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate you spending time with us, joining us at our home table. And we hope you roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.